Welcome to our channel, your go-to source for everything Sigma male. We explore the unique traits, psychology, and relationships of Sigma males, uncovering what sets them apart. If you're fascinated by this mindset and lifestyle, stick around. You won't want to miss what we have in store.
How high-value men command respect. A Guide to Cultivating Authentic Confidence and Influence. Chapter 1. The Cost of Integrity. The murmurs started as soon as Ethan Chandler entered the conference room. He felt the glances of his colleagues as he made his way toward the head of the table. Although he was only in his early 30s, his reputation as the company's finance director was known and respected, for better or worse. Today, he was about to put that reputation to the ultimate test. Around him, the air was thick with expectation. Ethan's CEO, Maxwell Crane, sat at the opposite end of the room, scrolling on his phone with a smug grin. Crane was a commanding figure, his gaze sharp enough to slice through pretenses. But today, Ethan felt no intimidation, only a cold certainty about what he was there to do. Crane's plan was the worst-kept secret in the room, a financial report that cleaned up numbers before the company went public. The scheme would make everyone in that room richer, but only by burying truths Ethan wasn't willing to hide. As the presentation began, Crane leaned back, his tone slick with confidence as he outlined projections that seemed too rosy, profits that shone a bit too brightly. Ethan listened, his arms folded, until Crane's last sentence hung in the air. And with that, we're ready to sign off on these figures. Ethan, can I count on you? Silence lingered. The room was waiting on his answer, and every eye was on him. Maxwell, these numbers, they're unrealistic, Ethan said, calmly, but loud enough to be heard by everyone. Crane's grin tightened. Unrealistic? They're projections, Ethan. We're trying to give investors a vision of what we're striving for. You know, set the bar high. Ethan took a breath, feeling the room's air turn thin. There's a difference between setting a high bar and manipulating numbers, he replied. If we go public with these, we're setting ourselves up for backlash, not to mention legal issues down the line. His colleagues shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Some of them had spent months quietly preparing for this scheme, one they knew would bring in enormous payouts if it went unchecked. Ethan was undoing weeks of careful planning with a single refusal. A ripple of tension spread across the room as Crane's smile faded completely. Ethan, Crane said slowly, you've been with us long enough to understand the stakes here. You want us to make this public launch a failure? No, I want us to be honest. Investors deserve to know what they're buying into, Ethan replied, his tone steady. If the numbers were strong enough, we wouldn't have to adjust them, would we? A long silence stretched out. The room was divided. Crane was the one signing checks, the one they answered to, but everyone knew Ethan had a point. Crane's stare hardened, and the temperature of the room dropped to a chill. All right, Ethan, Crane finally said, his voice laced with threat. If you're determined to keep us from success, that's your choice. The statement landed with a heavy thud, as Crane rose from his chair and motioned for the rest of the room to follow. The meeting was over. As the last of his colleagues filed out, leaving a mixture of disapproval and fear lingering in their eyes, Ethan stayed put, replaying the conversation in his head. He knew the risks of standing up to Crane, but he also knew he had just committed to a line he wasn't willing to cross. Ethan was halfway back to his office when he noticed his friend James leaning against his desk, arms crossed with an expression of resignation. Words spreading fast, James murmured. Crane isn't exactly thrilled. Ethan nodded. I figured as much. You're really not going to let this go? James asked, his voice edged with disbelief. This could put you out of a job, man. Crane's not known for handling defiance lightly. Ethan's expression softened slightly. He respected James, who had been his closest friend since he started with the company. I know, but I won't compromise on this, he replied firmly. I'm not here to build a reputation based on lies. James sighed, his brows furrowing as he studied Ethan. I get it, I do. But Crane's got influence, and you don't want to make him an enemy. Just consider whether this is worth it. Ethan's jaw tightened. If keeping my job means compromising my values, then maybe it's not the job for me, he said. His voice was calm, but his words carried a finality that struck James. As James left, Ethan sat at his desk, the weight of the confrontation settling in. He knew he'd just crossed into dangerous territory, but something in him felt a strange sense of peace. For him, integrity wasn't something he could toggle on or off. It was a permanent part of who he was, and nothing, not even Crane, could make him abandon it. That night, as he left the office, he noticed several colleagues avoiding his gaze, already aware of the day's events. Word had traveled fast, and the reactions ranged from disapproval to subtle admiration. There was a chill in the air, and Ethan could feel the beginnings of isolation settling in. He knew he was at a crossroads, where every decision from here on would demand courage and resolve. As he walked to his car, Ethan noticed a young intern from the finance team lingering by the entrance, casting uncertain glances his way. She approached hesitantly, clutching a file to her chest. Mr. Chandler, I just wanted to say, what you did in there today was, well, brave, she stammered, clearly unused to addressing senior staff. Ethan offered a small smile. Thank you, Emily, right? She nodded, visibly relieved. Yes, sir. I guess it just meant a lot to see someone stand up for what's right. It's not something you see very often here. Ethan gave a slight nod. It's not easy, but sometimes it's the only option. Stick to your values, Emily. They're what define you. She smiled, visibly comforted by his words, before she hurried off into the night. For a moment, Ethan felt a glimmer of reassurance. He didn't have a crystal ball, didn't know what would come next, but he knew he had set an example, however small, and that in itself felt like a victory. But as he drove home, his thoughts drifted to what lay ahead. Crane wouldn't let this go, he knew that much. In his mind, Ethan replayed the conversation, his own calm voice sounding resolute even now. He knew the path of integrity was one of sacrifice, yet for him, it was the only path worth taking. And if that meant standing alone, then so be it. Chapter 2. Under Fire. Ethan had barely settled into his chair the next morning when an email notification pinged on his computer screen. The subject line read, Urgent. Meeting with Maxwell Crane, 9 a.m. He checked his watch. He had less than 15 minutes. Every bone in his body sensed what this was about, but he pushed down the surge of anxiety, breathing slowly as he readied himself. He'd known this confrontation was inevitable, yet seeing it in black and white sent a wave of tension through his chest. As he walked to Crane's office, he passed colleagues who had clearly heard whispers of yesterday's clash. Some avoided his gaze, a few looked on with something like sympathy, but mostly there was silence. Reaching the massive wooden doors of Crane's office, he straightened his tie, reminding himself of his decision to stand firm. Crane's assistant ushered him in, and as Ethan entered, he felt the cold, meticulous decor of the office press down on him. Crane sat at his desk, fingers steepled, eyes locked on Ethan the moment he crossed the threshold. Ethan, Crane began, voice sharp and clipped. Close the door. Ethan did as he was told, and Crane wasted no time, his tone more ominous than the day before. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to dig in your heels like this. I thought you knew the score here. Ethan met his boss's gaze without flinching. I know what's at stake. But I also know what this could mean for the company's reputation, and more importantly, for the people who trust us with their investments. This isn't just about numbers, Maxwell. Crane's expression remained icy, but a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. So you're the company's moral guardian now, are you? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Ethan, this is how the world works. Everyone here is getting something out of this, financially and professionally. Including you, if you just play along. Not everyone, Ethan replied quietly. our investors wouldn't be getting the truth. Investors don't care about the fine print, Crane retorted, waving his hand dismissively. They care about returns. They care about a winning investment. This isn't the place to get philosophical about it. The dismissiveness in Crane's tone struck a nerve, and Ethan felt a surge of frustration rise in him. That's where you're wrong, Maxwell. Once people find out, and they will, they'll remember who was responsible. They'll remember who put short-term gains over honesty. Crane stared at him, his jaw set in a hard line. Do you realize what you're risking here? Not just your position but your career. If you continue down this road, you're going to find doors closing on you. At this company and any other company in the field. Ethan held his ground, his voice calm but resolute. Then I'll find a door that leads to the kind of work I can stand behind. But I can't change my principles for a paycheck. The silence that followed was thick and stretched long, punctuated only by the faint hum of Crane's air conditioner. Finally, Crane let out a cold laugh, but there was no humor in it. Well, I can't say I didn't try to reason with you, Crane said, his tone shifting to something almost pitying. But since you're so determined to burn bridges, I'm giving you an ultimatum. You have until the end of the day to withdraw your opposition. Sign off on the reports, and this whole little rebellion of yours can be forgotten. Ethan clenched his jaw, but he forced himself to remain calm. And if I don't? If you don't, Crane's eyes hardened, consider yourself terminated. Clear your desk and say your goodbyes. This is your final chance, Ethan. Think very carefully. Ethan met his boss's gaze, unyielding, even though he could feel the weight of Crane's words settling heavily on his shoulders. I appreciate the opportunity, Maxwell, but I'm not signing off on those reports. Crane's face darkened, his tone flat. Then we're done here. Without another word, Ethan turned and left, each step carrying the gravity of what had just transpired. The moment he closed the door behind him, he knew his career at Crane and Associates was over. He could feel a strange mixture of loss and liberation settling into his chest, his pulse racing as he returned to his office to gather his things. By the time he returned to his desk, the message had already spread like wildfire. Colleagues approached him, offering cautious words of sympathy, a few even of admiration. But most were careful to keep a distance, not wanting to be associated too closely with the man who had just defied Maxwell Crane. James found him shortly after, his face stricken with disbelief. Are you serious? You're really leaving? Ethan looked up from his desk, packing the last of his belongings. I didn't have a choice, James. Not if I wanted to keep my integrity intact. James shook his head, his expression a mixture of frustration and sympathy. I respect your choice, man, but Crane isn't the type to let things go. This could make things tough for you. No references, no network. You know how it is in finance. Ethan nodded. I know, but I can't let that stop me from doing what I believe is right. I'd rather face the consequences than look back and regret compromising myself for a paycheck. James was quiet for a moment, then clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You're either the bravest or the most stubborn man I know. I just hope it's worth it. Ethan managed a small smile. So do I. As he left the office, carrying the last of his things, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something bigger. The fear of uncertainty loomed large, but there was also a fierce pride that grounded him, a certainty that he'd done the right thing. When he stepped outside, the sun hit his face, warm and bright, and he felt a strange sense of clarity, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He had no idea what came next, no job prospects or safety net to catch him, but for the first time in years, he felt completely aligned with his own values. As he walked away from the towering office building that had been his second home, he noticed Emily, the young intern, standing nearby, watching him with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She hesitated, then approached him. Mr. Chandler, I heard what happened, she said softly. I'm sorry, but also, thank you. You've shown me that it's possible to do the right thing, even when it costs you. Ethan nodded, grateful for her words. "Thank you, Emily. Remember that, no matter where you go, stick to what you believe in, even when it's hard. It's worth more than anything else." As she walked away, he was left alone with his thoughts, the gravity of the moment settling in. Ethan was uncertain of what lay ahead, but he was certain that this chapter, however difficult, would lead him somewhere meaningful. And as he looked back at the building one last time, he felt no bitterness, only a calm resolve to forge his own path forward, no matter the challenges. Chapter 3. A New Beginning. 3 months had passed since Ethan walked out of Crane & Associates, and in those weeks, he had faced every fear he'd imagined on that long walk from the office. He'd sent out countless resumes, made call after call, and watched as every door in his field seemed to close just as quickly as he'd knocked. Maxwell Crane had kept his word. The unofficial word in finance was clear. Ethan Chandler was a whistleblower, a troublemaker, a man who couldn't be trusted. But amid the uncertainty, something unexpected had emerged. The tension he'd once felt over whether he could fit in or keep up with the ethical compromises others made had disappeared. A quiet confidence had taken its place, a steady resilience that reminded him he had, for the first time, full control over his path. His days were no longer colored by compromises or double standards. Even as he watched his savings dwindle and considered less than ideal positions, he felt like he'd finally earned his own respect, and that was worth more than he'd ever imagined. One evening, as he sat at his kitchen table, mulling over a slim pile of interview requests, his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. Expecting yet another automated "no," he hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Chandler? This is Sophia Anderson. I'm the CEO of Veritas Capital." Ethan straightened in his seat, recognizing the name of one of the few firms with a reputation for transparency and ethical business practices in the financial industry. He had applied there weeks ago, doubting he'd even get a response. "I've read your resume and reviewed your experience," she continued, her tone warm but direct. "I understand that your departure from Crane & Associates may not have been under the best circumstances. I'd like to hear your side." Ethan paused, his mind racing. This was his one chance to tell his story honestly, to show what had driven him to leave behind everything he'd worked so hard for. He took a deep breath and told her everything: the board meeting, Crane's demands, his refusal to sign the reports, and the fallout that had left him at a professional crossroads. He held nothing back, letting his integrity speak for itself, hoping it would resonate with her. When he finished, there was a silence on the other end. He worried he'd gone too far, shared too much, but then she spoke. "Ethan, we need someone like you at Veritas," Sophia said finally. "Someone who isn't afraid to do what's right, even when it's not easy. Your story, it shows exactly the kind of courage and moral clarity we're looking for. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you the position of Director of Compliance. We could use a fresh perspective on ethical practices in the firm, and I think you'd be a perfect fit." Ethan's chest tightened, the words sinking in. "Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'd be honored." They finalized the details, and when he hung up, he sat in stunned silence. This opportunity was more than a job. It was a validation of everything he'd endured, a promise that his path, however uncertain, had led him to a place where his principles would be respected. A week later, Ethan arrived at Veritas Capital's offices. They were smaller and more modest than the skyscrapers of Crane & Associates, but there was an energy in the building that felt grounded, purposeful. As he entered the office, he noticed people smiling, engaged in conversations that seemed genuine, not just pleasantries passed between meetings. Sophia welcomed him in person, leading him through the company's open workspace. She spoke about their values, how they had weathered several financial storms without compromising on ethics, and how they wanted to raise their standards even higher with his help. "Our clients come to us because they know we don't play the same games as other firms," she explained. "It's a rare commitment in this industry, and I need people like you to keep us true to it." Settling into his new role, Ethan found himself not only respected but trusted in ways he'd never experienced before. His input was valued, his perspectives sought out. Over the following weeks, he led initiatives aimed at reinforcing ethical transparency, introducing policies that encouraged honesty at every level. Instead of fearing his colleagues' scrutiny, he found himself working alongside people who shared his commitment to integrity. One evening, after a particularly productive meeting, Sophia asked if he'd join her for coffee at a nearby cafe. They discussed the day's projects and upcoming strategies, but as the conversation wound down, she leaned in with a more serious expression. "Ethan, I have to ask, what was it like, standing up to Maxwell Crane? He's a hard man to defy." Ethan considered the question, remembering the tension, the sleepless nights, the friends he'd lost along the way. But he also remembered the clarity that had followed, the quiet strength that had grounded him in those weeks of uncertainty. "It was one of the hardest things I've ever done," he admitted. "There were days I doubted myself, and there were nights I thought maybe I'd made the wrong choice. But in the end, I realized that I'd rather stand alone with my principles than compromise and lose respect for myself." Sophia nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "That kind of strength is rare. I hope you know how much that means to everyone here, to have someone like you on board." As they left the cafe, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment not just to the firm but to the people around him who believed in the same things he did. He had found his place not just as a professional, but as a man who could live each day without second-guessing his values. A few weeks later, Veritas Capital hosted a gathering for their clients and partners, a formal event in which Ethan was formally introduced to the broader financial community. As he mingled with industry leaders, he saw familiar faces, former colleagues from Crane and Associates, even a few who had been in that boardroom on his final day. At one point, he found himself face to face with James, his old friend. There was an awkward pause, but then James offered a small smile, extending his hand. "I've heard good things about what you're doing here, Ethan. I have to say, I respect you for sticking to your guns. I couldn't do it myself, but you've shown it's possible." Ethan accepted the handshake, feeling a deep sense of closure. "Thanks, James. It wasn't easy, but I'm exactly where I need to be now." As the night drew on, he noticed more nods of respect, overheard colleagues and clients commending his journey and the impact he'd already begun to make at Veritas. The very path that had seemed so uncertain had led him here, to a place where his values were not only accepted but celebrated. By the end of the evening, Ethan stood by a window overlooking the city, watching the lights sparkle across the skyline. He was no longer weighed down by the pressures of ambition or the fear of judgment. For the first time in his career, he felt truly free, free to build something real, to stand by his choices without regret. As he took in the view, he felt a quiet, profound peace settle within him. He was a man who had refused to compromise his integrity, who had walked through the fire of doubt and come out the other side stronger, clearer, and more resolute than ever. And as the lights of the city pulsed before him, Ethan knew he was exactly where he belonged. Here's a practical, to-do list inspired by Ethan's journey, designed to help you cultivate the qualities that command respect and align with your core values. Each step is a practical action that builds the foundation for becoming someone others respect and trust, just like Ethan. 1. Establish and honor your core values. Define your values. Write down your top 5 values, like integrity, honesty, fairness. These will guide all your decisions. Set boundaries. Decide what you're unwilling to compromise on. This will make tough decisions clearer in the future. Hold yourself accountable. Reflect daily on your actions, especially when they're challenging, and ensure they align with your values. Refuse compromises. When faced with a situation that pressures you to compromise, practice saying no calmly and professionally. 2. Develop quiet, unshakable confidence. Acknowledge strengths and weaknesses. List your strengths and areas for improvement. Knowing these helps you stay confident and humble. Practice self-improvement. Set one small goal daily to strengthen a skill or habit. Growth builds natural confidence. Learn from setbacks. View mistakes as learning opportunities. Reflect on what went wrong, adjust, and move forward. Take on challenges. Push yourself with activities like public speaking, volunteering, or learning something new. Confidence grows when you step out of your comfort zone. 3. Cultivate emotional control and discipline. Practice mindfulness daily. Spend 5-10 minutes each morning or evening meditating or practicing deep breathing. Pause before reacting. In emotionally charged moments, count to 5 before responding. This helps you act thoughtfully instead of impulsively. Create daily routines. Discipline comes from consistency. Develop a morning or evening routine that centers and energizes you. Accept uncomfortable situations. Resist the urge to avoid discomfort. Handling small frustrations calmly will prepare you for bigger challenges. 4. Give generously without expecting in return. Help someone daily. This can be as simple as holding a door, listening actively, or offering genuine advice. Mentor someone. Share your skills or knowledge with a junior colleague or friend. Teaching reinforces your skills and builds relationships. Volunteer. Give time to a cause that matters to you. This connects you to others and deepens your sense of purpose. Acknowledge others' contributions. Praise others sincerely, even for small achievements. Showing appreciation earns respect and strengthens bonds. 5. Show respect to everyone, first. Listen more than you speak. Practice active listening by making eye contact, nodding, and asking follow-up questions. Show you value others' perspectives. Empathize with others. Take a moment to consider others' feelings and motives before forming judgments, especially when there's disagreement. Avoid interrupting. Let people finish speaking before you respond. This small habit signals that you value what others have to say. Treat everyone with courtesy. Greet and speak with everyone, regardless of status or role, with genuine respect. 6. Become a master in your area of expertise. Commit to lifelong learning. Choose one area of interest or skill to deepen, like finance, technology, or personal development. Read, practice, and improve. Dedicate time daily. Spend at least 30 minutes a day developing your chosen skill. Consistency builds mastery over time. Challenge yourself regularly. Take on new projects or challenges in your field that stretch your current skills. Seek feedback. Ask for constructive feedback from colleagues or mentors to help identify areas for growth and improvement. 7. Maintain integrity in difficult situations. Stick to your principles under pressure. When facing a dilemma, refer back to your core values and decide based on what aligns with them. Practice self-reflection. Spend time journaling or reflecting on tough days to evaluate how well you upheld your values. Set an example for others. Be the one who speaks up for fairness and transparency, even if it's unpopular. Your courage will earn others' respect. Stay true to your decisions. Once you make a principled choice, stand by it confidently, even if it has consequences. 8. Build a supportive network. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Seek out individuals who share your values and drive for self-improvement. They'll encourage you to stay on track. Find a mentor or coach. Seek guidance from someone who embodies qualities you respect. Their advice can help you navigate difficult decisions. Attend networking events. Join groups in your field or interest area. Relationships matter and can open doors to opportunities that align with your values. Support others' success. Celebrate others' achievements and offer help when you can. Building relationships with generosity leads to mutual respect. 9. Reflect and adjust as you grow. Reflect regularly. Every week, review how well you've lived by your values. Consider areas for improvement, but also recognize your progress. Adjust goals as needed. Personal growth is an ongoing process. As you evolve, your goals and strategies should, too. Be patient and persistent. Change takes time. Commit to these habits and remember that respect is built through consistent, small actions over time. By following these steps with consistency and commitment, you'll cultivate the integrity, confidence, and resilience that make high-value men respected and trusted. It's a journey of character that, like Ethan's, is challenging but deeply rewarding.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Sigma male mindset, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. Join our growing community and stay tuned for more insights into the Sigma way of life.